Welcome to Motivational Humanity. You are not alone.
There's a moment most of us don't talk about. It happens in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday. Maybe you're washing dishes, or sitting in a parking lot after grocery shopping, or lying in bed at 2 a.m. while the rest of the house breathes quietly around you, and something moves inside you. Not pain exactly, not sadness. Something older than both of those. A kind of knowing that lives below your ribcage, below words, below logic, below everything your very sensible mind has carefully constructed to keep you functioning and fine. You feel it, and then, almost instantly, you talk yourself out of it. I'm just tired. I'm being dramatic. This is what life looks like at this age. Everyone feels this way. And you go back to the dishes. Here's what I want you to sit with for just a moment. What if that feeling wasn't a problem to be solved? What if it wasn't anxiety or hormones, or you simply being too sensitive? What if that quiet whisper rising up from somewhere deep in your chest has been trying to tell you something for years? What if your gut has been your most loyal companion and you've been leaving it on read? I've spent a long time thinking about the women I know. Women in their 50s, 60s, 70s. Women who have spent decades being extraordinarily good at taking care of everything and everyone. Women who packed lunches and kept secrets and swallowed their discomfort with a sip of coffee and a deep breath before the school run. Women who learned very early that their inner voice was inconvenient. Maybe someone told you that directly. You're too emotional. You worry too much. You always make a big deal out of nothing. Or maybe nobody had to say it out loud. You just learned it from watching. From noticing whose feelings filled the room and whose feelings quietly excused themselves. And so you got very, very good at something that no one ever put on your resume. You got good at overriding yourself. There's a term in psychology, interoception. It's our ability to sense what's happening inside our own bodies. The flutter of nervousness before something goes wrong. The tightening in your chest when a relationship doesn't feel safe. The inexplicable heaviness that settles over you in certain rooms around certain people. Our bodies are constantly communicating. Long before our minds catch up, the body has already voted. And research, decades of it, confirms what women like you have quietly suspected, but rarely been permitted to trust that gut feeling is real. It's neurological. There is a literal network of neurons lining your digestive system. Scientists call it the enteric nervous system. So sophisticated and so intelligent that it's been nicknamed the second brain. Your gut isn't being dramatic. Your gut has receipts. But here's where it gets tender. Here's where I want you to stay with me. Most of us didn't just accidentally stop listening to ourselves. We were taught to stop. Slowly, lovingly, sometimes harshly, we were taught that our inner knowing was less reliable than someone else's opinion of us. Less valid than keeping the peace. Less important than being liked, being needed, being good. And the weight we carry from years of that silencing. It doesn't disappear, it lives in us. It shows up as the chronic low, grade worry you can't explain. The exhaustion that sleep doesn't fix. The relationships you tolerate instead of treasure. The life that looks perfectly fine from the outside but feels, on the inside, like wearing shoes that are just a half size too small. You can function. You do function. Beautifully even. But something always pinches. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer it honestly. Not the answer you give at a dinner party. Not the answer that makes everyone comfortable. The real one. When was the last time you listened to yourself and trusted what you heard? Not the reasonable, practical, let me think this through version of yourself. The deeper one. The one who knew before the evidence arrived. The one who sensed the shift in a friendship before anything was said. Who felt the unspoken truth in a room full of smiling people? Who woke up one morning and understood, without explanation, that something needed to change? That voice. When did you last let her speak? And when she did you let her finish? This is where we begin, not with strategies, not with a list of things to fix. We begin here, in this sanctuary of honesty, with the simple, radical act of acknowledging that you have an inner life that deserves your attention, that your gut feeling isn't a glitch. It's a gift you were never properly taught to unwrap. Let me tell you about a woman I'll call Margaret. She's not a patient. She's not a case study. She's a composite of every woman I've ever known who smiled at the right moments and cried in the car on the way home. Margaret was 58 when she finally said out loud what she'd known for 11 years. 11 years. She sat across from me and said, I knew on our second anniversary that something was wrong. I felt it so clearly, like a cold hand pressing on my sternum, and I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself I was lucky to have what I had. I told myself that feelings weren't facts. She paused. She looked out the window. But they were, weren't they? They were facts the whole time. I just didn't have permission to believe them. I've thought about that word ever since. Permission. Because that's really what this is about, isn't it? Not whether the feeling was real, it was always real. The question was whether you were allowed to honor it. Whether you were allowed to be a reliable source of truth about your own life. Think back. Not to a painful memory necessarily. Just back. Back to the first time someone dismissed what you felt. Maybe you were 8 years old and you told your mother you didn't like the way Uncle someone looked at you, and she said, "Oh, don't be silly, he's just being friendly." Maybe you were 19 and your stomach dropped the first time you met your college roommate's boyfriend, and you couldn't explain why, and so you decided you were just being judgmental. Maybe you were 34 and you walked into a job interview and everything and you said, no, not this place, not these people, and you took the job anyway because it made sense on paper. Because the benefits were good. Because who were you to trust a feeling over a fact? We collect these moments. We don't mean to. But they stack up quietly in the interior of us, each one a small lesson in the same unspoken curriculum. Your perception is suspect. Your feelings are inconvenient. Your knowing is not to be trusted. And somewhere along the way, we graduated. We became experts at the one thing that would cost us the most: self-abandonment. Now, I want to be careful here. Because this isn't about blame. Not for the mother who dismissed you, not for the culture that shaped her, not even for the younger version of you who learned to cope the best way she knew how. Survival is intelligent. When we're young, when we're dependent, when we need love and approval to feel safe. Learning to suppress what makes others uncomfortable is adaptive. It keeps us connected. It keeps us belonging. The tragedy isn't that we learned it. The tragedy is that we kept doing it long after it stopped keeping us safe. Long after we had our own homes, our own incomes, our own lives. Long after there was no longer any child inside us who needed to shrink to be loved. We kept shrinking anyway. Out of habit. Out of muscle memory. Out of a deeply embedded belief, so old and so quiet we mistook it for truth, that what we feel is probably wrong, probably too much, probably better kept to ourselves. There's something else that happens when we silence the gut long enough. It gets louder, not in words. The gut doesn't speak in sentences. It speaks in symptoms. The insomnia that arrives with no explanation. The irritability that surprises even you. The low, persistent hum of dread on Sunday evenings. The way your body tenses in certain conversations before your mind has even processed what was said. The sudden, inexplicable tears in the cereal aisle of a grocery store on a perfectly ordinary morning. These aren't signs that you're falling apart. They are signs that something in you is refusing to be ignored any longer. Your body, bless it, is remarkably loyal. It will carry what you cannot say. It will hold what you will not feel. It will whisper for years. And when the whispering doesn't work, it will find other ways to get your attention. Not to punish you, never to punish you, to protect you. Here's something I find both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful about women in this season of life. Your 50s, your 60s, your 70s. By now, you have so much evidence. You've lived enough life to look back and see the pattern with painful clarity. The relationships your gut flagged early that eventually confirmed every concern. The decisions you made from your head that your body protested from day one. The times you stayed too long, trusted too quickly, gave too freely to people who treated your generosity as a given. And equally, the moments of extraordinary rightness. The friendships your gut recognized before your brain could justify them. The leap of faith that terrified your logic but felt, somehow like coming home. The quiet morning you decided something was going to change and everything eventually did. You have a track record. Your intuition has a track record. And yet, and this is the unspoken truth we almost never say aloud, many of us still reach for external permission before we'll trust our own read of a situation. We call a friend to check if we're overreacting. We read articles to validate what we already feel. We ask our husbands, our daughters, our sisters, am I being crazy? When was the last time someone asked you, am I being crazy? And you said, yes, completely ignore everything you're sensing. You wouldn't do that to someone you loved. And yet, here's what I believe, not as a theory, but as something I've watched play out in human life again and again. The women who find the deepest peace in this chapter of their lives are not the ones who finally got everything figured out. They're not the ones who resolved every old wound or achieved some pristine state of emotional clarity. They're the ones who came home to themselves, who stopped treating their own inner voice like an unreliable witness and started treating it like what it actually is, a source of ancient, hard-earned, body deep wisdom that has been quietly accumulating your entire life. The betrayal wasn't your fault. But the return, that beautiful, tender, sometimes terrifying return to yourself, that is absolutely, entirely available to you, right now, even after all this time. Especially after all this time, there's a particular kind of quiet that happens when you stop running. Not the quiet of emptiness, not that hollow, lonely silence you might have feared. Something different. Something that feels, the first time you really encounter it, almost shockingly gentle. Like walking into a room in your own house that you'd forgotten existed. Dusty, maybe, dimly lit, but yours. Unmistakably, entirely yours. That's what reconnecting to yourself feels like. And I want to be honest with you, because you deserve honesty more than you deserve comfort right now. It doesn't happen in a weekend retreat. It doesn't arrive after a single meditation or a journal prompt or a conversation, even a really good one. It happens in accumulation, in small, repeated acts of paying attention. In the daily, unglamorous, quietly revolutionary practice of asking yourself what you actually feel, and then waiting long enough to hear the answer. Let me start with something deceptively simple. Your body knows things before you do. I don't mean that in a mystical sense, though if that resonates with you, hold on to it. I mean it in the most literal, physiological way possible. When you walk into a room and something feels off, before you've identified a single concrete reason, your nervous system has already processed thousands of micro signals. Tone of voice, body language, subtle incongruences between what someone is saying and what their face is doing, the energy of a space, the weight of what isn't being said. Your conscious mind is still shaking hands and making small talk. Your body has already written the report. So the first step in reconnection isn't thinking more clearly. It isn't analyzing your past or mapping your emotional patterns or reading the right book, though all of those have their place. The first step is simply this: slow down enough to receive the signal. Most of us live at a pace that makes hearing ourselves nearly impossible. And I suspect, gently, lovingly, I suspect that for some of us, that pace wasn't entirely accidental. Business is a magnificent hiding place. When every hour is spoken for, when there's always something that needs doing or someone who needs you, you never have to sit in the uncomfortable territory of your own unspoken truths. You never have to hear what the quiet is trying to say. So when I talk about slowing down, I'm not talking about a spa day. I'm talking about something that can feel initially much more confronting than any spa. I'm talking about intentional stillness. 5 minutes in the morning before the world starts asking things of you. A walk without your phone. Sitting with your coffee and actually tasting it instead of drinking it while simultaneously solving the logistical puzzle of your day. These aren't luxuries. They're the conditions under which your inner voice can finally be heard. Now, here's where it gets interesting, and a little unexpected. When you first start truly listening to yourself again, you might not like everything you hear. Some of what surfaces won't be peaceful wisdom. Some of it will be grief. Anger that got filed away decades ago under not appropriate to express right now. Desires you talked yourself out of because the timing wasn't right, the money wasn't there. The kids were young, the marriage needed tending, the moment passed. Don't be frightened of this. This is not evidence that listening to yourself is dangerous. This is evidence that you are human, and that human beings accumulate unexpressed experience the way a house accumulates dust. Inevitably, without malice, and in every corner. What rises up when you get quiet isn't a crisis. It's a backlog. And the only way through a backlog is through it. I want to offer you something practical here. Not because I think you need a technique. You don't. You need permission far more than you need a technique. But sometimes a small, concrete practice gives the permission somewhere to land. Try this. At least once a day. Once, that's all. Before you make a decision, before you answer a question, before you agree to something or dismiss something, pause and drop your attention down. Not into your head where the negotiations live. Down. Into your chest. Into your belly. Into the place where the gut feeling actually lives. And ask without judgment, without rushing to an answer, what do I actually notice here? Not what should I feel. Not what is the correct response. Not what will keep everyone comfortable. What do I notice? It might be a tightening, a softening, a pull toward something, or a quiet but firm resistance. It might be nothing at first, genuinely nothing, because the channel has been unused for so long that it needs time to warm up again. That's okay. You're not broken. You're just out of practice. And practice, as it turns out, is something you are extraordinarily good at. You've been practicing for other people your entire life. Now you're simply redirecting some of that devotion inward. There's a woman, I'll call her Diane, who told me something I've never forgotten. She was 63, retired teacher, grandmother of 4. She'd spent most of her adult life, she said, feeling like there was a radio playing somewhere in the house that she could almost hear but never quite tune into. Always a little staticky, always just below the threshold of clear. She started doing something small. Every morning before she got out of bed, she'd lie still for just a few minutes and ask herself one question: how am I really? Not in a performative way. Not the answer she'd give her daughter when she called. The real answer. The one that lived underneath the fine, the good, the busy. That for the first 2 weeks, she cried every single morning. Not from sadness exactly. From relief. From the sheer, overwhelming relief of being asked. Of asking herself. Of finally having a witness to her own interior life, even if that witness was only her. By the 3rd week, something shifted. The crying softened. And in the quiet that followed, she started to hear things. Small things at first. I'm lonely in this friendship. I miss painting. I want to spend more time near the water. I've been afraid to say what I actually think at family dinners for 27 years. Small things. And enormous things disguised as small ones. She didn't overhaul her life overnight. She didn't need to. What she needed, what she'd needed for years, was simply to know herself again. To be in honest relationship with her own experience. And from that knowing, quietly, gradually, things began to change. Not because she forced them. Because when you finally hear what's true for you, it becomes increasingly difficult to keep living as though you don't. This is the gift that sits on the other side of reconnection. Not a perfect life. Not a pain-free one. Not the resolution of every old wound or the answer to every open question. Just clarity. The kind of clarity that comes from being in honest relationship with yourself. From knowing, really knowing, what you feel, what you need, what you will and won't accept, what lights something up inside you, and what quietly extinguishes it. That clarity becomes a sanctuary. Not a place you go to escape life. A place you carry inside of life. A still point at the center of all the noise and demand and beautiful complexity of being a woman in this world. A place that is entirely, unshakably yours. And here's what I want you to understand before we move into the final part of this conversation: you haven't lost her. The woman who knows things. The one who feels before she thinks, who senses before she sees, who carries a deep and ancient intelligence in her body that no amount of self-doubt has managed to fully extinguish. She hasn't gone anywhere. She's been waiting with extraordinary patience for you to get quiet enough to remember she was there. There's something that happens to a woman when she stops asking for permission to trust herself. It's subtle at first. You might not even have a word for it, but the people around you will notice before you do. There's a settling, a groundedness, a quality of presence that wasn't there before. Or maybe was there long ago, before the world taught you to second guess it into silence. You start taking up the space you were always meant to occupy. Not loudly, not aggressively, not in the way that requires an announcement or an apology, just fully. The way a tree doesn't ask permission to be rooted. I want to talk about what this actually looks like, not in theory, not in the language of self, help that floats above real life like a pretty balloon. in the actual specific, sometimes awkward and sometimes luminous texture of daily living. Because this is where it gets real. This is where the inner work stops being a private, internal conversation and starts reshaping the world around you, sometimes gently, sometimes with the kind of disruption that temporarily unsettles everyone who preferred the older, more accommodating version of you. Living from the inside out means that your gut feeling becomes a collaborator rather than a nuisance. It means that when your body tightens in a conversation, you don't immediately look for a way to smooth things over. You get curious. You ask yourself, quietly, internally, what is this telling me? It means that when someone asks you to do something and your first honest, unfiltered response is no, you don't automatically override that no with a yes before it's even left your body. It means that the quiet whispers you've been dismissing for years start getting a seat at the table where your decisions are made. Now, I have to say something here that might be uncomfortable, and I'm going to say it anyway because you deserve that. Coming home to yourself will cost you something. Not everything. Not the things that matter most. But something, some relationships will shift. Because there are people in your life, and I say this without judgment, because we've all been on both sides of this. There are people who have been nourished, comforted, and organized around the version of you that didn't trust herself. The version that was always available, always flexible, always willing to absorb discomfort so that others wouldn't have to feel it. When you change, that dynamic changes, and not everyone will celebrate it. Some people will call it selfishness. Some will call it a phase. Some will become quietly distant in the way that tells you they preferred your smallness, even if they'd never say so out loud. Let them. Because the alternative, staying small to keep others comfortable, is a price you've already paid for too long. And unlike most debts, this one doesn't get easier the longer you carry it. It compounds, it calcifies, it turns eventually into a kind of bitterness that has nowhere to go because you can't even name what you sacrificed or why. You don't have to be unkind. You don't have to be rigid or righteous or suddenly unavailable to the people who love you. You just have to be honest with them. And more importantly, before everything else, with yourself. Let me tell you how this shows up in the small moments. Because I think we sometimes expect transformation to arrive in dramatic installments. The big confrontation, the tearful breakthrough, the sweeping life overhaul. But mostly, it arrives in Tuesday afternoons. It's the phone call you don't return because something in you knows that particular conversation will leave you depleted for 2 days, and you're finally willing to honor that. It's the dinner invitation you decline, graciously, warmly, without a lengthy fabricated excuse, because you actually need a quiet evening more than you need to be perceived as social. It's the opinion you offer at the family table, the one you've been swallowing for years with a sip of wine and a diplomatic smile that you finally let exist out loud in the room. It's the doctor's appointment you make for the symptom you've been minimizing for 8 months, because your gut has been flagging it quietly and you're finally deciding that your body's signals are worth investigating. It's the creative project you begin, the painting, the writing, the garden, the music, without waiting until you have more time, more energy, more justification for taking up space with something that exists purely because it brings you alive. These are not small things wearing the costume of small things. These are acts of reclamation. I want to speak directly to something that I know lives in many women at this stage of life. A particular fear that doesn't always have a name, but feels something like this. What if I listen to myself, and what I hear changes everything? What if the gut feeling, fully honored, leads somewhere disruptive? What if the truth you've been quietly carrying requires a conversation you don't know how to have? A decision that frightens you? A loss you aren't sure you can bear? I won't insult you by pretending those fears are irrational. Sometimes listening to yourself does lead somewhere hard. Sometimes the unspoken truth, once spoken, does rearrange things. Sometimes the gut feeling that's been whispering for years is whispering something that will require courage to act on. But here's what I know, from psychology, from human observation, from the stories of women who have walked this exact path ahead of you. The fear of what you might hear is almost always worse than what you actually hear. And the life lived in avoidance of your own truth, that carefully managed, smoothly running, quietly suffocating life extracts a cost that the fear never tells you about in advance. It tells you about disruption. It doesn't tell you about the slow erosion of self that happens when you spend years being a stranger to your own interior. The hard conversation, the honest reckoning, the courageous choice, these things hurt in the way that moving hurts. The way stretching a muscle that's been contracted for too long hurts. It's the pain of expansion, not destruction. Here is what I want to leave with you. Not as a conclusion. This doesn't end, it continues in your life, in your body, in the accumulation of small, honest moments, but as something to carry. You are at an extraordinary juncture, not despite your age, because of it. The women I know who are most vibrantly, most authentically alive in their 50s, 60s, and 70s are not the ones who've been spared difficulty. They're the ones who've stopped spending their energy on the exhausting performance of being fine. They've stopped maintaining the elaborate architecture of a life built primarily around other people's comfort. They've come home. And home, it turns out, is not a place of perfect peace. It's not the absence of difficulty or uncertainty or loss. Life brings all of those regardless, at every age, in every season. Home is a quality of relationship with yourself. It's knowing that when the hard moments come, and they will, you won't abandon yourself inside them. You won't gaslight your own feelings or override your own needs or dismiss the quiet whispers of your own body to keep the surface of things smooth. You'll be there for yourself, the way you have always unfailingly been there for everyone else. That gut feeling you've been carrying, it was never noise, it was never drama. It was never you being too sensitive, too emotional, too much of anything. It was your deepest self, speaking in the only language she had available. The language of the body, of sensation, of that ancient knowing that lives below words and before logic. She was telling you the truth. She has always been telling you the truth. And the most profound, most quietly radical thing you can do, not just for yourself, but for every woman who comes after you, who watches how you live and learns from it what is possible, is to finally, fully, without apology or hesitation, believe her. You've spent a lifetime learning to read the room. It's time to come home and read yourself. The door has always been open. You just needed to remember that it's yours.